The Supreme Court chamber was tense, every seat filled, the air thick with anticipation. The nation's most powerful legal minds sat in silence, their expressions grave, as the weight of history pressed down on the room. All eyes were fixed on the 9 justices, each one holding the power to shape the future of American governance. The audience, a mix of legal scholars, journalists, and citizens, barely dared to breathe. This was no ordinary case. It would define presidential power for generations to come. The outcome could alter the balance between the executive and legislative branches, setting a precedent for decades. Outside, protesters and supporters clashed, their signs and chants echoing the nation's deep divide. Some demanded limits on presidential authority, while others insisted on strong executive action. Police formed a barrier between the factions, a living symbol of a fractured country. Tension simmered, and the world watched as America wrestled with its own identity. Inside, the Chief Justice called the case, American Institute for International Steel versus United States. The courtroom fell silent, every word recorded for history. The core question was simple, yet profound. Could a president unilaterally impose billions in tariffs without Congress? The answer would ripple through every corner of the economy. These tariffs, a legacy of the Trump administration, had upended global trade and American business. Companies struggled to adapt, and families felt the impact in their daily lives. Now, the court would decide if such sweeping authority belonged to the president or Congress. The decision would test the very limits of the Constitution. The justices' faces were unreadable, the stakes enormous. Every argument, every precedent, weighed heavily on their minds. The fate of a cornerstone of American economic policy hung in the balance. The world's eyes were on Washington, waiting for a signal of what would come next. The world waited for the gavel to fall. In that moment, the future of presidential power and the nation's economic destiny rested in the hands of 9 justices. Would presidential power expand, or would Congress reclaim its constitutional role? The answer would shape not just policy, but the very soul of American democracy. To grasp the stakes, we must revisit the origins of Trump's tariffs. Promising to protect American jobs, Trump imposed sweeping tariffs on steel, aluminum, and Chinese goods, citing national security. China retaliated, targeting American farmers and escalating a global trade war. Tariffs, meant to help U.S. industries, instead raised costs for businesses and consumers. Farmers lost export markets. Manufacturers faced higher prices. The trade war sent shockwaves through the economy, fueling uncertainty and division. The question: was this tough stance worth the price paid at home? The legal fight was about more than economics. It was a battle over the Constitution. Congress, not the president, holds the power to set tariffs and regulate trade. Trump's team argued a 1962 law let him act for national security, but critics called it a pretext for bypassing Congress. Steel importers, manufacturers, and farmers challenged the move, saying it set a dangerous precedent. The case became a test of executive power versus legislative authority. The Supreme Court was asked, who truly controls America's economic destiny? In a landmark 6-3 decision, the Supreme Court struck down the broad use of tariffs under the 1962 law, sending shockwaves through the legal and political landscape. The ruling was not just a technical legal matter, it was a powerful statement about the limits of presidential authority. The majority ruled the president's actions were an unconstitutional overreach, emphasizing that no single branch should wield unchecked power over the nation's economic fate. The court's opinion underscored the importance of maintaining the balance of power at the heart of the Constitution. While the law itself survived, its use was sharply limited. The justices made clear that future presidents would face strict boundaries if they tried to act alone on trade. The court declared tariffs are fundamentally a legislative function, not an executive one, reaffirming Congress's central role in shaping the nation's trade policy. The decision reversed decades of growing presidential power over trade, rolling back a trend that had allowed the White House to act with increasing independence in global commerce. Trump-era tariffs on steel, aluminum, and Chinese goods lost their legal foundation, leaving industries and trading partners uncertain about the future of U.S. trade policy. Agencies scrambled to unwind years of complex trade policy, racing to adapt to the new legal reality and rework regulations that had shaped entire industries. For businesses and consumers, it signaled relief from higher costs and uncertainty, offering hope for more stable prices and a clearer path forward. The court had redrawn the map of economic power, In Washington, shifting authority back to the legislative branch and altering the balance that had defined trade policy for generations. Congress, not the president, would now set the course for trade, restoring a constitutional order that places the power to shape America's economic destiny firmly in the hands of the people's representatives. The ruling split the nation. Business groups and farmers cheered, seeing hope for lower costs and renewed exports. Democratic leaders and moderates praised the return to constitutional checks and balances. For them, it was a victory for the rule of law and economic stability. Trump and his allies condemned the decision, warning of job losses and weakened trade leverage. They called it a betrayal of American workers. In manufacturing towns, some feared for their jobs. In port cities, others saw a lifeline. Consumers hoped for relief at the checkout. The decision's impact was immediate and deeply personal. The debate over America's economic future was far from over. The Supreme Court's ruling reshapes American trade and governance, marking a significant shift in how the country will operate on the global stage. Presidents can no longer impose sweeping tariffs alone. Congress must now lead, ensuring that decisions are more representative of the nation's diverse interests. The process will be slower, more deliberative, and require compromise, fostering a more balanced approach to trade policies. Businesses and consumers may see lower prices, but some industries face new competition, which could lead to a period of adjustment and innovation. The U.S. signals a shift from protectionism to renewed engagement with global partners, aiming to rebuild alliances and foster international cooperation. Rebuilding trust abroad and forging a new trade strategy at home will be challenging, requiring careful negotiation and strategic planning. Congress must now craft a bipartisan approach that balances domestic needs with global realities, ensuring that the U.S. remains competitive and fair. For Americans, the ruling is a reminder. Decisions in Washington have real consequences, impacting daily lives and the nation's future. The trade war may be over, but the debate over America's place in the world is just beginning, setting the stage for a new era of policymaking and international relations.